It's another episode of the Quintessential Show. We are crowdsourcing solutions to South Africa's unemployment problems, South Africa's economic problems, and we're talking to inspirational South Africans whilst we do it. Today is a doozy, I must let you know. It's going to be really interesting. I think you want to stick around for it. I'm interested in talking to people in industry who can shed some light to the youth in our country in terms of which career path to take and what occupation to look into going in. So today I'm going to be talking to Lucinda Krige, the first woman to qualify as a chief engineer in the South African fishing industry. She works for the world-renowned Sea Harvest. Let me show you quickly in terms of Sea Harvest. They are a company that was founded and established in 1964 on the Atlantic west coast of South Africa. They own everything that they do. They own, from the ships to the processing facilities. And here is an idea of the products. You've probably bought them before. Hake, Fish Fridays, Fish Fingers, the people who are involved in bringing you that in a calendar year. So really good. Lucinda, how are you doing?
Well, thank you, Quintus, yourself.
Very good to talk to you. I've seen a couple of articles rolling around the web about you, very interesting. And, everybody focusing on the fact that you are the first female chief engineer in the South African fisheries industry. Do you consider yourself to be that?
Actually, I never thought of it like that. With all the media hype around it with World Fisheries Day, it really hit home now, only after all these years.
Yeah, so tell me, when did you join Sea Harvest and how did that come about?
Basically, I started at Sea Harvest as a cadet in 2003, engineering cadet.
Mm-hmm.
They advertised for cadets, and my father actually saw the advertisement in the newspaper. Knowing that I always wanted to be an engineer, he decided that this was the career for me. I asked him what it was about. He didn't know, neither did I, but I applied and was successful. So I started my journey with Sea Harvest in 2003.
Mm-hmm.
And when I boarded my first vessel, that is actually when I started to discover what marine engineering was all about and life at sea. And the rest is history.
Listen, I'm sitting in a gloomy Pretoria. It's raining, it's cold. I think you're in Saldanha at the moment, right? And it's like 36 degrees there. But that's something that you probably have become accustomed to, like the temperatures on the ocean and all that kind of stuff in your line of work. I mean, does it get kind of grueling sometimes? Or like when you were an engineering cadet, was it like grueling? Were there times where you're like, this is too much?
Yes, it was. And the funny part is, especially during winter and when we have bad weather, I'm a bit on the short side. So when I lay in a bunk, there's a lot of space between my head and my feet and the end of the bunk. So when the vessel is going head on with swells, then I basically shift up and down because I can't really steady myself because of the length. So yes, there were times where weather wasn't always pleasant. We had like grueling waves and that we had to experience even after I qualified. And with all that, I always enjoy the weather at sea more than I actually do ashore.
Oh my word! Yeah, that's quite something. I'd love to experience that. I've been on a cruise ship before, but I guess those are completely different circumstances because you're having to deal with fish and all of that kind of stuff. But so you say this is when you were 20 years old. You became an engineering cadet, and I think a lot of South African unemployed youth would love to hear. I mean, you say your dad found the clipping in the newspaper. But these days, do you see an easy entry into the industry for, say, an unemployed youth or even just a matric graduate? Is there any way of getting into the fisheries industry for youth that are really looking for jobs these days?
Yes, there are, most definitely. There are so many opportunities going around. I know here at Sea Harvest particularly, the line of work that I'm in now, I deal a lot with the new entrants into the industry. And a lot of times we have matriculants that apply and participate in learnerships that other fishing companies also run. And also we have a cadet program where we as a company try to give opportunities to matriculants as well as students who have completed the maritime studies at CPUT or DUT, because we're trying to bring a balance to the caliber of trainee that we bring in. And if the individual goes study at CPUT, they bachelor's nowadays in maritime studies, either marine engineering or navigational studies, that gives them a head start in the field. And when you look at the blue economy, their cadetships start once someone has completed their studies at tertiary institutes. So that is one of the paths we as a company follow. And then also, as I said, we take in matriculants to make sure that we give opportunities to our local youth in the areas that we operate as well.
Yeah, very good. So obviously you had to go through theoretical and practical studies as well, to become the first female chief engineer of the maritime industry. Well, the fisheries industry or the deep sea trawling industry, as they call it. So is that how you got qualified in the field, or has that changed substantially in the last couple of years?
It has actually changed substantially since I started my studies. I entered as a cadet with just an academic grade 12. So I had no technical background, and I had to start with my technical subjects at Northern TVET College. I had to start at N2, do some N2 subjects, in 3, in 4, and in 5. And then once I've completed that, I had 7 months of workshop training that I had to complete as the practicals. And then I did my non-diploma maritime subjects at CPUT. At that time, they didn't have the national diploma or the bachelor's that they have now. So after I qualified, couple of years after that, they had the National Diploma for Marine Engineering as well at CPUT. And now that program is phasing out. And next year they're starting with a bachelor's
Okay.
in marine engineering as well. So a heck of a lot of changes has taken place since I qualified.
No, yeah, but trying to find a way to really put students into the space and get them well qualified for doing it. But would you? I mean, you had to be there very theoretically and practically. I mean, do the students still get put on ocean vessels and they have to be in the practical environment these days?
Yes, most definitely, especially if they want to follow a career at sea. And as a South African student, if you want to pursue a career at sea, you need to be licensed by the local maritime authority, and that is SAMSA. And in order to get your operator's license, you need to complete your theoretical, your practical, as well as your workplace experience. And that component is your time at sea. So your sea service you need to complete in order to be able to get your operator's license to qualify then eventually as marine engineer or seagoing engineer.
So you've done those hard hours, in your life. Now, when you're doing, a sea job, obviously you need to find your sea legs. This is something that people talk about all the time. So I mean, what are your tips in terms of that? How do you get your sea legs?
It's different for every individual. And I know over the few years that when I started out, there was a lot of advices from a lot of the guys. Like, for instance, with me, every time I went to sea after a long period, I would get seasick.
Oh.
But then another colleague of mine that started with us as a cadet, never in his life has he ever had seasick.
Wow.
So it differs from individual to individual. But to get your sea legs, basically, it's more of a mental switch, because you need to adapt to the fact that you are still on solid ground on board the vessel, technically, on the deck, but it's moving also. So you need to adjust mentally to the fact that I'm stable, but it's just with motion. So you need to get used to your body movements. With the movement of the vessel, and that makes it somewhat easier to adapt. And after your first or two first trips, then when you get ashore, then it's difficult to adjust to not having any motion under your feet. So yeah, it takes mental changes, and it takes you as an individual to really be um, sure that this is where you want to
Yeah,
be.
because I mean, when you get back on land, it still feels like you're on the boat, type of thing, you know.
Yes. Yeah.
You guys are in the business of doing that. But tell me more about the vessel itself, because obviously there's a lot of mechanical components on the vessel that you've obviously had to familiarize yourself with during your cadetship. Now, what kind of complexity level are we talking about in terms of these kind of boats that go out to sea and, you know, get our very, very important food in South Africa?
It depends. It varies from vessel to vessel because you get your fresh fish vessels, which goes out for shorter trips, and the production they do on board those vessels is they basically catch the fish and they clean it and they pack it. So they gut and head it and then they pack it in the fish hold and then it's further processed on board ashore in the shore factory. But then you also get your freezer vessels where all the processing takes the primary processing takes place on board the vessel. So that means your factory equipment is much more advanced than what your equipment would be on a fresh fish vessel. So I my first trip was on the freezer vessel, the Harveston Dewey, and on board that vessel we had everything from boilers to reefer systems because you had your slurry plant which supplies the slurry ice to the factory to the chilling tanks, and then you had your freezers, your blast freezers, and then your fish oil that needs to be maintained with that reefer system. Then you had a fish meal plant on board that vessel as well, and your factory was basically everything that you would find on board inside a shore-based factory. So on board a freezer vessel, you basically process fillets. That was the big product that they focused on, or that they still focus on. And most of the freezer vessels products is for export markets. So when you're on a fresh fish vessel, then in turn you have a much smaller factory. You have your stocker pond, and then you have your conveyor belts, and then you have a heading machine and your gutting area, and then it goes down to the fish hold, where they basically place it in bins or tubs and they ice it up and they close it up and so on. So the complexity levels of technology on board the vessels varies. But as technology advances, especially the processing side, your technology on board your freezer vessels especially, it increases as well. But then if you look at the technology in terms of the steering systems, your main propulsion power, your trawling equipment on board your vessels, like your winches and so on, it's actually quite exciting if you just think of all the technology that goes into it. And yes, there is quite a number of marine systems that you need to familiarize yourself with, and it changes continuously.
Yeah, so you obviously then see, you know, like technological development bleed into the industry, and you see new technologies on board and stuff like that. Is that constant? Do you constantly see new technologies that you need to familiarize yourself with? Or there's some vessels that will never change, like it's always going to be like this legacy stuff that you use?
You know, most of the fresh fish vessels in basically in the country, I would think, it's not a lot of technology changes that takes place on those vessels. And some of the vessels are quite aged, but they're still in good condition. Where you'll see a lot of technology developments take place is mostly on your freezer vessels. But then you also get your bigger fresh fish vessels, more advanced, where with the ability to tow and trawl, like a few of the vessels that we have in our fleet. And there you also see quite a number of technologies take place. And developments, and yes, you constantly have to make sure that you keep yourself updated and you read up on technology changes as it goes along, because as an engineer on board the vessel, you're not just responsible for the operations and the maintenance, you also have to be part of the team that looks at developments and upgrading of certain machinery on board your vessel as well.
Yeah, I mean, continued professional development, you know, it happens in every single industry, and you need to continue, like, you know, stay afloat of what's happening in the industry. But the thing about marine engineering, and I think you'll agree after you've now got your qualifications and everything, is that it's very cross-discipline. So it like packs a lot of engineering disciplines into one industry. So tell me exactly how that works. I mean, do you have to now know little parts of electrical engineering, little parts of mechanical engineering? What's the deal?
Yes, so basically when you start out in the field, As an engineer, you started as engineering officer. That's the first entry level. So you started with the basic knowledge of various disciplines, and that is where your workshop training also comes in, because that's the hand skills that you also need to familiar get under the knee. Like for instance, your winch system on board your vessel, it's hydraulics and pneumatics and electronics that goes into that. Then there's refrigeration, there is electrical, there's your engines, which is the mechanical part, and the electronics part where your controls come in. So basically you start out with a cluster of skills that you need to familiarize yourself with and obtain, but also the theoretical side also covers at the entry level the basics of things to ensure that you on board a vessel you are able to maintain and operate and do fault finding, which is very important, especially on working vessels like trawlers. And as you progress through the levels, your studies increases from the one level to the next, and that is where more information gets added to the syllabus that you actually study, to be able to get to chief engineer level.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not easy. At the end of the day, it's one of those things that you have to specialize in, and you have to familiarize yourself with the unique kind of technologies that are unique to the fisheries industry. So I mean, was it easy for you? Did you ever think when you were younger, like, I'm going to be this engineer one day type of thing? Because, in South Africa, there's a lot of focus on humanities, in the circles that I'm around, people want to be in the humanities and the arts and stuff. But did you, when you were younger, think, I'm going to go the humanities side, or did you know somewhere deep inside that's like, okay, I'm going to go for something in engineering? Because that always screams mathematics to people. And I don't think they like that.
Yeah. The funny thing about my career choice, when I was little, my father would always ask, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I had, back then, that's in the early 80s, I had this thing of wanting to be a policewoman or something in that line. Yeah. And eventually one day he asked me, why that? And I said, because I don't see a lot of women doing it. And he's like, but don't you want to be a lawyer or a doctor or something? And I said, no. I want to do something where I know there's not a lot of women doing it. And then a couple of years later, I was in primary school, and one day came home with a newspaper, and there was an article on one of the first female civil engineers in the country that was part of a bridge project. I think it was in Joburg somewhere. And he said, you see, there is one of the first female civil engineers, and there's not a lot of women doing it. And that's when I decided I want to do engineering. And as I went to high school, I was always interested in maths and science. So my subject choices was around that. Those were the two main subjects that I always focused on. And in high school, my last 2 years, I got the opportunity to attend open days at universities and technicons, and my father arranged a meeting with one of Stellenbosch's lecturers, who was also a qualified engineer. And he actually had quite an in-depth conversation with me regarding engineering. And we went into the various disciplines, and then I was stuck because I didn't know which discipline I wanted to follow. Because I now had all this information and I was interested in all of it, and I couldn't do all of it at once. So when marine engineering came along and I actually discovered what it was about, I realized this is actually what I was looking for, and I didn't even know it existed. But at the end of the day, engineering is basically a field where the science, you as an engineer get the opportunity to put the science into practice. So the scientists, they study, they come up with wonderful theories, and you as an engineer get the opportunity to actually put that theories in practice. And with an engineering qualification, you basically obtain skills that is required in any field. And that's why a lot of good managers that you find in businesses up to CEO level, most of them started out as engineers initially, their first qualification, because of your analytical thinking skills, your problem solving skills, and that you obtain. And with your engineering skills, you can assist with making a difference in the world, basically. So Yes, a lot of people they shy away from maths and science, but those are the two subjects that actually enhances a lot of the skills that engineers eventually obtain and that they use in various fields that they go
You
into.
see, that's why I even tell humanities students, who have said, I'm not good at maths or science. I even tell them, when you get your humanities degree, your Bachelor of Arts or whatever, go and try and find an engineering company to form part of in any case, So, like in my case,
Yeah,
I write for an engineering college and we generate news about engineering just to, shed some light on the industries like you are involved with that keep the country ticking along and keep the world moving, because engineers constantly, develop these technologies that make the world go round. It's like we wouldn't have
yeah.
water, we wouldn't have fish, we wouldn't have food. So I really take my hat off to what you guys are doing, and I mean, you sound very, very knowledgeable about the industry, and we need more of these stories to come out. So, like you say, girls in primary school or something can see these kinds of things and say, what's the deal? I don't have to, go this one way and just be one thing. I can actually become an engineer. But it's a tough road. I mean, it's one of those things. You are now, though, handing the baton over. You've spent 7 years at sea, right? And now you are onshore. You have an onshore job. Tell us more about that.
Yes, I've exchanged my overalls for an office job, so to speak.
Yeah.
I'm responsible for the technical and maritime training at our Saldanha base. So what that entails is basically on the maritime side, I need to ensure that the service that I provide to our fleet department is knowledgeable and up to date with regulations to ensure that their vessels are safely manned. So it goes hand in hand with the skills development in terms of developing young talent in terms of navigational officers and engineers in the company. And that's where our cadetships comes in, as well as the other programs, what we have for our employed individuals that wants to go further, who maybe doesn't have a grade 12, who doesn't have maritime studies as a background. So we take them through the ranks because as a cadet, you study and your first qualification is an officer qualification. But not everybody has that theoretical background. So that is where we basically look at the different levels from ratings to officer, where they are at and what we can do to progress them to the next level. And that is basically how we try and build our pool of talent at various levels on the maritime side. And I'm very involved with curriculum development, advisory committees, and I part of the SAMHSA syllabus committee as well as an industry representative, and on the National Fishing Forum as well, representing the industry as well and sea harvest and so forth. But also then on the technical side, the biggest portion of that portfolio is our apprentices and our apprenticeship development. And that is a major focus nationally now for the last couple of years. Because even if you look at your Operation Pakisa, marine manufacturing, that is the sector of it where they focus on apprenticeship development, where they have different maritime trades now being developed, companies or that they're looking at assisting to up in numbers in terms of skills development when it comes to marine manufacturing. So the apprenticeships is the biggest focus, as I said, because we take in unemployed youth and we develop them to become artisans. We also give that opportunity to permanent employees who are maybe maintenance workers or trade hands who has the potential to become qualified artisans. And we take them through the ARPL route then to qualify as artisans. And as a company, we are fortunate to be part of the national program of DEET, the Centers of Specialization. That is basically the 21st Century Artisan program that DEET is running. And we as a company, we're participating in 2 trades at the moment. And next year, we're looking at expanding that participation to 5 or 6 trades. So it's not just about developing for sea harvest or developing our own people,
Yeah.
but it's also about aligning our skills development with national initiatives. Because at the end of the day, sea harvest cannot employ every single person that they develop. And if we retain everybody that we develop, then we won't be able to create opportunities for new young talent to come in. So when we develop individuals, we want to ensure that when they walk out of sea office, that they are a benefit or they have the skill set that other companies would hunt for.
Yeah, no.
And what we've seen over the years, or what I've seen over the years within sea office, is that normally when people leave sea office, they go into higher positions and they just go further up the ranks. And that tells me that we're doing something right in terms of the development of our staff.
Yeah.
So yeah,
No, I think when
it's another interesting thing.
yeah, when I look at the industry, I'm always like, I work in e-learning these days, and I wonder, what is the future of this, e-learning initiatives where people can learn via correspondence, even marine engineering one day type of thing, so everyone will descend down to the seas, but you could be studying it in Gauteng, for example. It shouldn't be, this prohibitive thing that stops you from becoming part of the marine engineering industry. So but it's incredible, like you say, you can't employ every single person who goes through there, but at least you give them skills that they can use in workplaces that they find themselves in, and that's the whole thing. South Africa, we're throwing around these terms, food security lately, and we're throwing around these terms, unemployment lately, but it sounds like you guys have basically taken away a few hurdles to entry into the industry, and I hope that's the case, because I think we really need, they say 29% unemployed people in South Africa, but a lot of that, like half of that, 50%, is the youth. So I'm always looking at the situation and saying, man, we really need to direct the youth in terms of industries that are picking up and are ever expanding, and like you say, there's new roles and new things to teach all the time. So yeah, now your day-to-day responsibilities there in Saldanha Bay, is it one of these things where you are teaching all the time, or are you more managing everybody around?
I'm not spending as much time as I'd like in the classroom anymore.
Okay.
So I'm more on the managing side of it. So because I'm very involved in the industry committees and changes and developments that's taking place. So unfortunately, I can't do all the teaching myself. I would love to. But a lot of the developments that's been taking place, like for instance in the maritime sector with the STCWF, that the SAMHSA is looking at implementing in South Africa, because we are party to it. It takes a lot of engagement with SAMHSA and with the rest of the industry. So that takes up, especially this year, it has taken up a lot of my time, and it has taken me out of office quite a lot. And especially with the Centers of Specialization program, because the Department of Higher Education and Training, they have actually run the pilot program this year. So that with that program, the employer is much more involved in the development or the training of the individuals at the college. And the college is more involved with the training at the workplace. And there we have reference group meetings and advisory meetings and so forth. So that has also taken up quite a lot of my time this year out of office. But I do have wonderful people that works with me that keeps the ball rolling when I'm not here. But most of the time, especially now, I'm more on the managing side of things and not in the class.
Yeah, not on the water. But I mean, for the festive season, do some of the guys that are on sea get some time off or leave, or are they the ones that you see out there at sea, the little twinkles, busy staying there during the festive season? Is there time off? What are you doing this festive season?
I do know that there are talks of our operations closing down in December again for maybe 2 weeks, like we did last year. And then that means our fresh fish vessels.
Hey, it's a tongue twister. It really is.
Yes, they are actually tying up. So that means those the individuals on board those vessels, they get some time off with the families. But on your freezer vessels, because they process and they're out at sea for much longer periods, they will be out at sea still. But the guys are on rotation. So you do a few trips and then you're on shore leave. So it depends on where in the rotation they are. But not all of them will be at sea. Some will get the opportunity to be at home. And I know normally with with the rotations, operations always try and not have the same individual being at sea every year. So they try and to accommodate to some of the guys to have some time with the families at home as
Perfect.
well.
Well, thank you for giving them some time off, and hope you take getting some time off as well. And you must enjoy your festive season. But Lucinda Krige, thank you for joining me here on the show today. I really think hopefully this gets shared far and wide to show that there are South Africans out there that are doing their part when it comes to specializing in industry and making sure that the new entrants in industry develop themselves and equip themselves with skill. But yeah, the first female chief engineer of the deep sea trawling industry, that's quite something, that's quite a notch on your belt. So I think you can be proud of yourself, and thank you for being such an inspiration to everybody else. Hey.
Quintus, thank you so much for allowing me to share my story once again.
You need to tell me though, how do you get fish stink out of your hands? I mean, this must be the stinkiest industry in South Africa. Come on.
You get so used to it that you don't even realize when it's not in your hands anymore.
I can smell you guys through the laptop, hey.
Yeah, but I have to say that I'm really grateful to CRs for the opportunity they've granted me, and other females at sea as well. Because in the fishing industry, there is so much more to this industry that people don't really know about. One day, if you ever in Cape Town, you should actually pop in, because you will then meet the wonderful graduates. We have the interns, learnership candidates, the work. So there's a lot more to the fishing industry than just going to sea, and people don't know that.
Yeah.
And they don't realize that. So when they look at sea hours, or they hear sea hours, then they think going to sea. But if you actually look at the operations, it's different departments that is supporting that function of going to sea that people don't always know about, and that is also one area where a lot of opportunities lie.
Yeah, no.
So I appreciate the opportunity to tell people about my journey. And the opportunities that CLS has to offer to a lot of young people out there.
Yeah, no, perfect. Getting a window into the industry is something, that I think that's the thing about education, is that even this is an education to somebody today, because it opens their eyes to how to exactly get into the industry. Because some people say, yeah, you should become a marine engineer, but the actual practical steps to getting there is the tough part. So I think South Africa is doing this thing where we're trying to educate each other on every platform possible, so that we can push people towards industries that or gently nudge them rather into industries that might really keep South Africa going, and that's what I'm interested in. I'm interested into talking to people like you. I mean, you do things that I probably will never be able to do in my lifetime, so hey, there you go.
So when you're in Cape Town, pop in.
I'm going to, but you guys need to put something. You need to get some warmers for that sea of yours. It's too cold. I'm a KZN boy, a nice Indian Ocean, and it's warm. Yay, your ocean, it's too cold.
Go to sea. You will find different weather there.
All right, listen, it's so good to talk to you. Thank you for joining me on the show today.
Thank you, Quintus.
Cheerio, bye-bye.
Bye.